We've talked about impermanence, and we've talked about what was the dukkha or suffering. The third mark of existence is not self, and it seems there's a little tension here, because one thing you actually commonly hear. I mean, you just said you have the intention to think, and
Sure.
but it isn't just that I'm pointing out that you use the word you. We all have to use the word you and I as a conventional matter, but what you commonly hear with many meditation teachers at many meditation retreats, I think, is like thoughts think themselves, or if you pay attention, you'll notice these thoughts just drift by. They just come from nowhere. So the idea isn't that there was an intention that originated with you. Now,
the intention is also a thought. So intention falls into the category of thought.
Mm-hmm.
There's an intention to think, and then the thought, and then the mental impression of the thought, all of which fall into the category of thought. So when they're saying thought, in a broad category, they also include intentions, they include mental impressions, they include memories, and they include all the sort of analytical monitoring process as we're going. So like, as I'm moving my hand, I'm also noticing that my hand is moving on the screen, for example, or as I tilt my head, oh, my head's tilted, or whatever it is, right? So there's that monitoring, which the brain is also doing, which is also all in the category of thought. So there's the linear thought stream of, oh, I've got to figure out what to say next because I want to make sure this interview goes well. That's the linear thought stream. But then there are all the intentions, which are also thoughts to think that, and the monitoring of the process as it's going on. So those are all in the broad category of thought. And most people, when they think of thought, they're just thinking about the linear narrative, right? They're thinking about their linear story, their narrative, the linear processing of, oh, what am I going to say next to it?
Okay. Now, I mean, one thing I've noticed while meditating about thoughts is that they are there are feelings associated with them. I have, or you could say I, if you want to, well, let me use that word. I have feelings about thoughts. I mean, there are, I want to, that thought feels good, that thought feels bad, but I think if you pay close enough attention, you'll see that thoughts pretty much always have some kind of affective coloring.
Yes.
Now, how does that relate to what you've already said?
Well, actually, that's one of the most fascinating topics in meditation of all. And it's because, okay, wait, how can you feel a thought? That's a funny thing, isn't it? You would think that you couldn't feel thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
So we can look at this two different ways, neither of which is necessarily always the best way. So we could look at it from the way which says there are thoughts, and then they create related physical feelings. So when you have a thought, some brain chemicals or chemistry or whatever, presumably, creates a sense of some sensations in the body somewhere that are either pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral, right? So when we feel sadness, we feel it usually down here or in our stomach, or, we may feel fear in our throat or whatever, or we may feel joy sort of welling up through us. We're not exactly sure where it's welling up from, but it's kind of all over the place. Or we may, feel other sensations like that, apprehension, and the whole body contracts, right? There's this clear and incredibly intricate, rich dynamic between thoughts and physical sensations. So that's one way to look at it. Mm-hmm. And all feelings obviously have, basically by their nature, they've got these physical components, right? It's this complicated and intricate, interesting interaction between like how our body feels when we, think certain thoughts or have certain images arise. Oh, sorry about that.
That's okay.
Sorry about the phone call. Oh, there you go. Good. And that's, or we could take another point of view, like, are dreams mental? Maybe dreams are a mentally created thing, right? So if we take the dream world as to gain some insights into thought, we can feel physical sensations in dreams. So it may be that thoughts actually have physical components to them, or physical tangibility, which is really another interesting and profound insight that you can gain from meditation and start noticing, wait, thoughts manifest physically. They're almost like noise on the physical body.
You can feel their impact on your body. And that presumably
thoughts actually have physical components to them, which is actually a very important thing. So you could actually say maybe pleasure is in some ways in the thoughts, or maybe they're a sort of a unified thing that splitting them up that way, it doesn't help. So at certain stages of practice, it may not be useful to split them up separately, but to notice them as this sort of flowing, fluid dynamic of causal elements.
Yeah. Well, I would think that, surely thoughts have physical incarnation in the sense that there is something going on somewhere in your brain when you have one, some actual synapses firing. But in terms of feeling their tangibility, feeling their presence, they're bumping up against your body in some sense of various ways. I would think that would have a lot to do with the affective coloring of the thought. I mean, that's one of the things you're feeling, right?
So you're clearly feeling the physical stuff, but the thoughts themselves actually have physical components to them, which is a very strange thing to say, and that starts to blur the sense doors, right? So meditators often start to notice these sort of synesthetic elements, where sense doors aren't always as totally perfectly segregated as we generally think they are.
So the classic case of that is when different numbers have different colors. Is that the classic case of synesthesia? Like when someone, I mean, there are people who have something called synesthesia, right? And that's
yes.
Is that the deal? Like whenever they think of 7, they think of blue, or?
No, synesthesia would be like that they feel sights, or they see sounds, or whatever, which it turns out all of the sense doors in all people do this to a teeny little degree, right? So when we hear a sound, we also create an image that somehow is related to that sound, and we also geolocate it in our brain in a sort of a mental space. So if you heard a sound behind you of someone clapping, instantly there are going to be a bunch of visual sensations that are going to sort of co-arise with that sound of someone clapping behind you that put it into a three-dimensional visual frame of where you think that sound is, what you think it was, and what it implies for you. So there's going to be this cascade of physical things, of visual things, along with the auditory thing. And actually, that's one of the fascinating things about meditation, is noticing all these little intricate cross connections that show how our brain actually processes stuff, which is to subtly mingle sense doors and have things relate to each other, which is why thoughts can be painful, or why, sounds can be pleasurable or painful, or why sights can cause us duress, or how we can, there are subtle physical aspects to thought. Like if I want to reach out and touch something, you can actually watch the process by which the brain modeled in 3D what it expected to feel and when it expected to feel it as the hand reaches towards an object it's about to touch. And you can actually notice that anticipatory process and all the cool things about how thought actually models physical stuff, which actually has real physical components to it, which are outside of where you are. So like, for example, when I've got this glass here, for example, and I want to reach my hand over to it, even before I touch it, my hand is anticipating feeling things, but where that anticipatory thing of feeling them is happening is actually where the glass is, where you wouldn't think I could actually feel anything. There's subtle aspects of thought that actually you notice actually have physical components here where my body clearly is not. So the brain does all these cool things, and you can start to notice all those little intricacies in meditation, and they're actually important. They seem like subtle or trivial, but it turns out that getting to know those actually helps you see a lot about feelings, about emotions, because thought is subtle stuff, and yet it's incredibly powerful.
Right.
And so if you can't notice all these subtleties about thought, then even though it's very experientially subtle, it will have a lot of power that you don't understand why it's having that power.
Yeah.
And so you can, anyway, and those are also powerful effects that can be utilized skillfully later on. So when you actually learn to have some control over the stuff and learn to have more mastery of your mind by thinking specific thoughts or by tuning attention in specific ways, you can then cause all these outrageously cool physical, visual, auditory effects, which are very powerful based on just thought.
So, perhaps related to what you just said about the glass, on my last meditation retreat, there was a moment when I was meditating in my room. There was rain outside, and for a little while, it seemed like my awareness of the rain was where the rain was.
Nice. That is a key insight.
Well, yeah, but then it faded, and then I thought, how do I know I wasn't just being a crazy person at that moment? And that's my question to you, is like...
Well, that's actually the scientific model. So here's the weird thing about the scientific model of the brain.
Yeah.
The scientific model of the brain says this is all a sort of a highly artificial, put together, highly processed, three-dimensional construct in a brain somewhere.
Right.
Where that brain is, we're not exactly sure. That becomes philosophically very problematic.
Wait, what do you